Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles.
I want everybody to be able to express what's on your mind based upon what we have read, okay? And that's great. I have a ton of stuff to talk about as well, but, my commitment to this thing is it's like a book club, right? Where we're all participating, sharing our wisdom, questions, et cetera, et cetera. Before we begin, I want to say a few words. Sound familiar? I'm a rabbi. I'm supposed to say that, All right, just to pick up on a few points left over from last time, which I think are very, very important. At the end, there is a discussion about the last line in the Mishnah that was cited, dealing with why was one human being created alone, if you recall that. And the point I want to raise is the last line, which says, Bishvili nivra ha'olam. The world was created for my sake, for me. It sounds, and that's a person should be able to say, there's only one person created, okay? So that's a model for me. The whole world was created for Adam. So similarly, that's me. Okay. And so there's a discussion there, what that means, and if it's a good thing to say something like that or not. And Held cites, it's Rabbi Sachs, I think, or was maybe somebody else. I don't recall. Anyway, where I think it was it was whatchamacallit, the great Zionist rabbi, first great Zionist rabbi in Israel. Help me.
Yeah, Cook.
Rav Cook. I think it was Rav Cook, right? Rav Cook, who mentioned that in the end, there's a whole discussion of, on Yom Kippur, and it's actually mentioned that what I'm about to say is not only said on Yom Kippur, but in the very preliminary parts of the morning service, it's mentioned. What am I? I am nothing. I am dust, et cetera, et cetera. And in the end, he says it's appropriate that be said because we got to remind ourselves, is that really what we are? And, on Yom Kippur in particular, that's what we should think about because we try to get ourselves out of that mess. And Held has a slightly different take on all of that. He says, no, I like the version that somebody else mentioned. This may be Sachs, that in the end, the whole world was created for my sake so that I can fulfill my divine mandate to go out there and help cure the ills of the world, that I can imitate God and seek to help God in bringing the world to a higher level of existence. Okay. And he says, I don't want to ignore that element. And he also makes the point that it's also important. We don't believe that a Jew has to give up their sense of self-confidence and self-worth. Okay. Because then we're saying that I am somehow not fully in the image of God. If I am fully in the image of God, then I am worth something significant. But what is it but that comes with a responsibility. What's the responsibility? Doing God's work, imitating God in how we approach the world. So I must say that I like Held's spin on that. And I think that may be ultimately the intent of what the Mishnah says, because the Mishnah there is not talking about someone who can allow themselves their ego to express itself in an uncontrolled way. Because basically what that Mishnah is trying to talk about is to say that human beings are sacred. That's the whole point of that Mishnah. Human beings are sacred. Therefore, before you exercise capital punishment, you may have to be darn sure that beyond a shadow of a doubt, the person merits that. And I remind you that's the jumping off point through which the Talmud makes it almost impossible to execute someone, because there's so many hoops that you have to go through until you reach the point that you can actually do it. Okay. Now, So that's number one. I see, Bert, you withdrew your hand. Okay.
Well, no, I was just going to say, and I forget the details. Isn't there a Talmudic story about the rabbi said, I have two pieces of paper in my pockets?
Yes. I don't know if it's Talmudic or Hasidic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need one in each pocket. For me, the world was created, and the other one says, I'm nothing. I'm dust. Yeah.
But for me, that's a story of the balance between the two.
Right. And it goes to the whole point of humility, right? I mean, humility, and he talks about humility, right? And Moses, remember, Moses is understood to be, was this something we're talking about here? Just a second. No. All right, good. No, you remember, Moses was defined as being the most humble person who ever walked the face of the earth. And here is a guy who was humble in the sense he never, up until a certain point, he never did anything for the purpose of self-aggrandizement. Everything he did was to serve God or serve the people or both simultaneously, right? And he never sought anything. In fact, when he never sought anything for his own aggrandizement, with one fatal exception. What was the one fatal exception?
Could it be an interpretation of his letting his anger get out of control? Because when you're angry.
Say that again.
When his anger got out of control, not controlling your anger could be seen as narcissistic.
Under what
You mean hitting the rock?
When he hit the rock.
Right.
Because it's like a statement.
Wait, hold on. Step back. Yes, but you've got to be more careful about what actually was going on there. And it's something that people don't note. Normally we don't see this. All right. I'm going to discuss this more at Sudah Shlishit on July 6th live, no video, at Shul. But anyway, when Moses, it's not just that he hit the rock. What did he say?
He said, I'm going to get the water.
He said, you rebel. He yelled at the people.
Well, not being a rebel, that they were rebels.
Do you want us to get?
Yes, that's it. Should we, meaning himself and Aaron, bring forth the water? That's the moment when he did a 180-degree flip. His anger so much took over him, overcame him, that he did, and at no time in his little mini speech does he mention God. And his whole point was he was supposed to say, whatever he was supposed to say to the rock, not hit it, was supposed to say to the rock, was to indicate this is what God is about to do for you. And based upon, and God says he wants him to, God needs to be sanctified at this moment, okay? And Moses blew it. And that's why he was punished. And God sensed something had changed. Okay? All right. So, but this whole notion, but here's the other thing. There is another statement, a very important statement that really brings this all together. I just have to throw it out because you all know it. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, right? Just love your neighbor as yourself, right? What does it say? I can love myself. It's okay. I can seek self-respect and positive gratification in the things that I do. But I have to love every other individuals with the same kind of intensity so that I recognize that they too are in the image of God. So it's balance. I mean, going back to what Bert said before, you've got to balance. The challenge is to balance between yourself as a human being, created in the image of God, and all the other people in the world who are created in the image of God. And we have to, that's what it means. That's what it means. That's what Judaism would say about ourselves, right? We got a Yetzer HaTov and a Yetzer Hara. And who created both of them? The Talmud. Who created the Yetzer, the evil inclination? The devil? No, God did. God created both. Because he says, without the Yetzer Hara, without what we call the inclination toward evil, we wouldn't reproduce. A person wouldn't seek to, wouldn't build a house, wouldn't get married, et cetera, et cetera. And that was a recognition that the basically what it's saying, they don't put it in these terms, the need to recognize our own right to protect ourselves, right? Self-preservation. Self-preservation is natural, nothing wrong with it. All it means is it's got to be channeled into self-preservation for a positive means, as a positive means to a positive end in God's eyes. Okay, so keep this, it's complex, nothing simple. Creation is not simple. We are not simple. That's what it's telling us. Okay, Bobby Meth has his hand up.
Yeah, I'm sure we've discussed this before, but what kind of cruel God treats Moses that way when Moses never, ever, as you said, did anything with self-interest, and this one time doesn't give credit to Hashem, and God punishes him? So
Yeah.
how cruel can our God be that he treats Moses that way?
Right.
And second, about B'Tselem Elohim, I'm a docent at Holocaust Museum LA, and we have a Torah. And the two things I talk about in the Torah are Hillel and Shammai standing on one foot and the difference between them. And I tie into that the concept that Judaism and Christianity share the concept of B'Tselem Elohim, and it's a very, very important concept in both religions. And it is not a concept that Islam shares. And I raise that as an issue in modern times.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Wait 1 second. Let me answer that. Margaret, hold on a second. I'll get to you. Wait. Okay. Regarding God, I'm giving away more of my lecture. It's all right. Doesn't matter. God
Not all of us will be there, so it's okay.
Okay. All right. What? You're not coming on Shabbos? Okay. It's okay.
I didn't say me.
All right. Now, I think what God sensed that it was more than just that, because the instruction that God gave Moses was very clear. Take you've got to go back a few chapters after the revolt of Korach and Datan and Aviram. Okay, the great revolt. Okay, chapter 17. So the people are still angry. Why does Aaron get to be high priest? Why is he the one? Who appointed him? So God tells Moses, tell the heads, have every tribe should select a staff that is part of the what the leaders have, and bring it to the tabernacle, put it inside the Mishkan, and we will see who is God's choice to be the high priest. And whoever staff has a miracle with it, that's the one. And of course, Aaron was the leader of the Levites, so he represented the tribe of Levi, and he put in his staff. Next morning, Aaron's staff was blooming with almonds, and all the other staffs were clear. Nothing, right? Okay. Moses is told, put Aaron's staff in front of the ark inside the tabernacle and leave it there. And if there ever should come a revolt of some kind, take it out and show it to the B'nai Mary, to the people who are revolting, and it will quell the revolt, because they will remember how that staff flourished. They will remember what happened to Korach and his people, and they will cease from rebel. That was the whole point. All right. Now go down to the point of the rock. All right. So God says, take the staff from in front of the ark. Whose staff was it? There's only Moses had a staff. That staff was not in the tabernacle. It was Aaron's staff. And what was it for? What had God told Moses just a few months, days, weeks beforehand? He said, take it out, show it to the rebels, and it will end the revolt. All right, so he says, take the staff, bring it out, and talk to the rock. That's exactly what he said, okay? Moses was not told to hit the rock. Moses shouldn't have been told to, because that was not what was going on. So, I see your hand, Kathy. Let me finish. So the point is, not only did Moses raise a point about his own ego here, regarding his own ego, shall we? But in the process, he defeated the whole purpose of what that rod was supposed to stand for.
Oh.
It was a reminder not to revolt, and it would have resulted in a peaceful resolution of the entire matter. That was God's intent. And then you talk to the rock and say, rock, bring forth water. So Moses actually violated what had become a significant element of crowd control that God had set up initially. So it wasn't just himself and Aaron. What will we do? He violated a significant step that God had created. And the whole point was, if you do this, then the crowd, the rebelliousness of the people can be controlled in a much more peaceful, quiet way. And Moses ignored that completely, because for the first time, he allowed his anger to overwhelm him. And what God is now realizing is that these two guys who are over 100 years old, probably it's time for them to not do things. And he wanted to make sure, because this is something that was probably known, or it's not a secret. He wanted to make sure that the people don't think that Moses can get away with this. Because if he would have done by doing what he did, he created his own means of solving that incident. And he ignored what God had commanded to do. And now, so it's meaning then, okay, I don't have to listen to what God wants because I can deal with it myself. I'll solve your problems. That's what was going on. And in God's eyes at that moment, it was time. Yes, and Moses could not take the people into the land, because what basically is going on here is a couple of things. Now, if I may speak from the perspective of Torah of modern understanding of the Torah, okay? Moses was revered by the people. There's no question about it. When Moses dies, when Aaron dies, as a result of the same thing. And by the way, you should see how angry God is. The people who are called rebels, B'nai Mary, you hear that word, Mary? Nothing to do with the name Mary. It's Memre Shud from the Hebrew root Memre She, which means to revolt. Rebels, you rebels. So when Moses takes the rod at first, he says to, oh, you rebels, okay? He calls the people before he hits the rock, you rebels. It sounds like he's going to do the right thing. He should have said, oh, you rebels, see the rod, you remember? That's what he should have said. But suddenly his mind flipped and he took it and hit it. And the first he said what he said, then he hit the rock twice even. Not once, twice, just to make sure. So he was raising questions about God's ability to help. All right, anyhow, so that's what he did. When Moses, later on at the end of the chapter 20, when Aaron finds out that he is going to die and be going up now, he will be buried on a mountain which is indicated, right? For Har. All right. He's going to be that's where he's going to die. All right. So we know where Aaron is buried. And that's, what does he say? God says to Moses, because you guys rebelled against me. And he uses the same word, maritem, same root. You rebelled. Same root he's now using it to define what Moses and Aaron did. They became rebels. That's the point. And then later on at the end of chapter 27, when he takes Moses up to the mountain and has him view everything, and he says, you're not going into the land. Why? Because you rebelled. So the point is, Moses was doing the exact antithesis, playing the exact role, the exact opposite of the role that he should have been doing at that moment. And God remembers that. Now, where was Moses buried?
We don't know.
We don't know. Isn't that strange? We know where Aaron's buried. Why not Moses?
Because Aaron wasn't venerated as much like Moses was.
Okay, right. That's number one. Good point. He was the high priest, but he was not Moses. So, okay. What else? Why would you be afraid? Wouldn't you think it would be good to have a memorial for Moses set up so that the people could come and give honor to him and mourn and cry and etc. All right.
So we don't worship Moses.
Wait. There are two hands up. Denise, are you dealing with what I'm talking about?
My hand was up for something else, but I wanted to answer this also. Not answer,
All
but
right, so this is the answer to what I'm saying now.
yeah.
Then we'll get back to your other question.
No, but so I
Denise, what?
Can I say something about this?
Yeah, Denise, and then Tybal. Go ahead.
So I feel like this is kind of in the Ten Commandments also, where the first thing says, that Ani Hashem Elokecha, Asher Seiti Eschem Me'eretz Mitzrayim, that it was me. It wasn't Moshe. It was me, God. Right. And so I often go to a little Chabad shul, and I feel like that's really relevant because it's very easy for humans to think that it was Moshe, or like in the Chabad case, everything's about the Rebbe. And they know where the Rebbe is buried, and they go there like, it's complex, but it brings up a lot of stuff that I think, if it's not so attached to a person and it's more distilled, then it remains more about God, and you retain that connection. And that's important because we don't worship a person, but the relevance of that is that we all have access to that. We all can tap into God, and he's here for all of us. It wasn't just Moshe and who's one and done. Yes.
That is just about what I was going to say. Yes, exactly. And I think, keep in mind, most of the time when the people rebel in the wilderness, whom do they blame? Whom do they say took them out of Egypt? Moses, and then secondarily Aaron, right? They were very confused as to who actually redeemed them. And beyond that, I just want to let you know something. We know that there's a lot of Egyptian influence in early Israelite culture, because the Egyptians controlled Egypt until about the 1150. And even after that, there were periods of time when they made incursion. But for about 300 years, from about 1450 to 1150 BCE, Egypt controlled the land of Canaan, even after the Israelites began to settle in there. Okay? All right? And so the Egyptian influence there. When do pharaohs become gods?
When they die, which is where I was going.
When they die.
Rabbi, mine was going to be the cultural context, with the American Jewish analogy being Christmas trees, that you have to set the boundary with what the people are used to in common culture. Like Bert in the beginning was talking about spending all that time in the Gulf. There, you wouldn't have to have Jewish communities. You'd have to be concerned about other things. But here were the people that came from Egypt that missed the leeks, that missed the onions, that were so focused on you just get fish from the Nile. That was their cultural context. So the segue is, given how Egyptian culture venerated the ruler dying in terms of becoming divine, that's what you needed to make the barrier about.
Right, yeah, exactly. And you think about it, Moses ultimately, if you just in terms of the story, who was Moses' prime enemy? Pharaoh, right? So whom do you put up to stand and struggle against Pharaoh? Another Pharaoh. Now, there was another guy with like power, and that's what Moses' role was. And in the end, he won. I mean, of course, the whole point is God defeated Pharaoh. But you're right. And even in the course of the stories, as I said before, the people were confused, right? And when they build the golden calf, why did they build the golden calf? Who was missing? Moses. And they build a golden calf, and what do they say about it? Eila Elohecha Yisrael asher hotziyucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. This is your God, O Israel, who took you out of Egypt. The golden calf took you out of Egypt. That's the God right there, represented by that calf. But the calf took the place of whom? Moses.
So wait, you think
it's clear. The Torah itself intimates that the people were confused as to the limits of Moses' power. So at the end of his life, at the end of his career, when he starts to say, look what I'm going to do for you, it was a sign. And therefore, Moses, we don't know, nobody can go to his grave and worship him in any way, shape, or form. Okay. Now, Margaret, a while ago, You had your hands up. Did we deal with your question?
Thank you so much for remembering. My question was that one of the participants said, it was a totally practical question, that there was something in common between Christianity and Judaism that was absent from Islamism or
Yes.
Islam.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't, I didn't catch what he said that was.
Oh, that was about the God being created in the image of God.
Okay.
That
Interesting.
concept.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's it.
As far as I know, he's right. Yeah. As far as I know, he's right. Yeah. All right. So Kathy, and then again, Table. Go ahead, Kathy.
This group of people that Moses was yelling at weren't born in Egypt. They didn't spend any time in Egypt.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes.
So they wouldn't have that Pharaoh ideology.
Well, no, but they grew up with Moses leading him through the desert.
Right. I mean, but it wouldn't be a comparison to.
Right. Yeah, of course. Right. But the point is, and you're right, a lot of those people, because this is at the end of the 40 years that he hits the rock, not at the beginning. And so, yes, it's the next generation. But here's the point. The fact that they could stand up there and yell and complain, what do you do? Why did you take us out of Egypt to let us die in the wilderness again? They're sounding like their parents. So it compounds the felony, if you will.
That's kind of like what goes on between the children of people that were in concentration camps. They still have some of the bit.
Well,
concentration
a lot of kids who are raised by survivors, how they were raised is not because of the scars in the characters in the psyches of the survivors. They're not clear as to how they should raise children because they're scarred, and it's a fact. Some people came through it and the opposite. They became loving, caring parents. But others who were horribly scarred for one reason. I mean, I know someone who became a very powerful and successful person, and their son committed suicide. He was a survivor. And I knew how he operated. The father did. Very demanding and totally possessed. And he was very successful. So, he got away with a lot. He wasn't a criminal at all, no. But in terms of pushing people around and so forth and making demands and so forth, he was unrelenting. I saw it.
But the children of the people that left Egypt might have reacted in the same way as what I'm saying.
Well, I'm saying, yes, you're right. I'm not disagreeing with you. Yeah, I think it makes sense. Sure. Okay, Tybal. And then I want to come to today's reading.
I'm sorry that I didn't follow this somehow, but given a certain amount of sibling rivalry, when you said that at the golden calf, and I just looked at the verse 32:4, this is thy God, O Israel, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. I was expecting you to say that the you was God, but I think you said the you was Moshe. And it seems strange to me that...
No, this is your God, Israel. Eila Elohecha Yisrael asher hotziucha miMitzrayim. They use a plural here. All right, probably.
But isn't the referent God not Moshe?
No, because no, that's the whole point. They're talking about a golden calf. The calf.
But isn't the calf stands in for Moshe?
In their mind, yes, because who's missing? Who was absent for 40 days, and whom did the people think is somehow gone and who abandoned them? God in heaven? That's the point. It was the absence of Moses that they're responding to. It says so. Moses was delayed. He wasn't there. The people built the calf.
But how does that become such a big sin? It's not a sin against God, is it?
What? That they build a calf to worship? The calf was the calf could have been. We don't know we don't know. It doesn't say this calf is representative of. Could have been a representative of Baal, because Baal was represented by a calf. Could be a representative of the Egyptian god, It's a young bull is what it is, not just a little cat. It's a young bull. Okay. So one of the powerful Egyptian gods is a young cat, a young bull. So I can't say specifically which God concept, but the point is they brought what it's doing, weaving into the story a pagan element, right? And it's the void that triggers it is Moses' absence. The people could not at that point understand the concept of an invisible God. I mean, that's an underlying, it's not mentioned specifically, but clearly the whole reason throughout, and in a sense, the Torah's narrative on this is probably very accurate. The fact is that paganism, idolatry, continued to, we've talked about this before, idolatry continued to be actively operative in the land of Israel up until probably the destruction of the first temple. Fact. Read the prophet. They speak only the truth. Okay, and that's what they saw. Idols all over the place. On the mountain, right? Jeremiah loves that motif, right? On the high mountain, the high hill with the trees. And you worshiped your pagan gods over there. The trees themselves were gods. Okay. All right. Anyhow. All right. So, yes, where were we? All right. Today we are going to talk about the notion of charity, of gratitude, and the notion of protest. Those are chapters 2 and 3, or 1 and 2, whatever they were. Right. Okay. So, comments, please. Now, shift gears. Clear your mind from golden calves and Moseses and, egos and stuff like that. Shift over now. And so we're going to talk about these other topics. All right. So, as I said before, last time, what are your responses? Let's start with the first chapter, okay, of gratitude. In reading that chapter, what impact did it have on you? What did it make you think about? What did you appreciate? What bothered you? What did you have difficulty in understanding? Okay, the floor is yours. Okay, the floor is yours. All right, I got Bert, I got Tybal, and then others will follow. Go ahead, Bert.
I think this is something that many others have said as well, but I think that gratitude is really the basis of living a God-centered life. And I think he's making that point, that if you don't have gratitude, then first of all, you should be a Jew, but gratitude should be, for me, it's the beginning. And after I read that, I started to think a lot about gratitude and realized that every blessing that we say is gratitude, is an expression of gratitude. Then when you say Baruch Atah Adonai, you are expressing gratitude to God. So that was very powerful for me. And I had never connected that to tzedakah. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, good. Very good. And I think that, just if I can make an observation, then we'll hear from Tybal and then from Barbara. I often tell people that, especially at a time of mourning, when people have lost someone, that the beauty of Judaism is that during death, in most cases today, in our life, our experience, until we get to be older, generally speaking, death doesn't happen every other year, right? I mean, most of us. I can tell you I'm 80 years old, and people my age are dying, and it's sad, okay? And some of you who are my age or approaching it understand. 10 years ago, even, remember I was a congregational rabbi, so I dealt with death a lot. But in terms of on the personal level, my my grandparents passed away a long time ago. And in my eyes, they were old, and it was time for them to go. The first time I felt real grief, I've had grief then too, but personally, much deeper, was when my father died in 1997, okay? And that's over 20 years ago, right? It's 27 years ago. Am I counting right? Yeah, that's right. That was, it was a powerful impact. But the point is, I couldn't argue because he was old. It was time. Same thing with my mom, even more so. But, it was painful, both of them. But one of the things I kept in mind was, you say brachot all the time. The whole point of it is to appreciate the gifts that God has given, right? He uses the concept of grace, right? And from the Christian point of view, by the way, they're the ones who sort of nuance this word, which means a gift, something that God gave, not because you asked for it, but because it was an act of love, free from Him, from God, an expression of God's love to us. So he makes the point: our very creation is a gift from God. And he talks about Moda ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Right? Every morning a religious Jew gets up and says, "Thank you, God, for you restored my soul. I'm alive every day. Thank you, God, I'm alive."
That could be the most important Jewish prayer there is.
It could be. Yeah. Right? And then during the course of a day, 100 blessings. We've talked about that a lot, right? Appreciate this, all these little things. People say it's a nuisance. No, it's not. It's an appreciation. If you do that, then suddenly when you have a tragedy, you realize, and somebody can say to you, hold on, that's a tragedy, but is that the defining element in your life? What about all those gratitudes that you had up until now? They go away? They're worthless? They're meaningless? And the point is, no, the grief is there, but the appreciation, the thanks, the gratitude is a counterbalance to that. And you understand that, yes, there are tragic deaths that are impossible to understand. But at the same time, there are wonderful things that you're saying thank you for. If you are observing these blessings, doing these blessings, I always used to say, you take a beautiful apple, right? And you hope and pray that that the inside is as good as the outside, right? And you say a blessing, Borei Baruch Atah Melech Olam, Borei Pri Ha'etz, creator of the fruit of the tree. And then you take that bite and you say, oh my God, that's amazing. Well, you said the blessing. Who gave you the apple? Kadosh Baruch Hu. Thank you. That's wonderful. That's amazing. It's a miracle. And so on and so forth. And by the way, what it says is when you say these blessings, you should not simply do it in a mechanical way. No, that's fast food. Judaism does not believe in fast food. We believe in thoughtful eating, prayerful eating. That's what kashrut ultimately is all about, guys. Thoughtful, sacred eating. Because eating is performing a miracle. It's called keeping you alive. And you should not take that for granted. So you say blessings. That's what blessings are all about. Yeah. Okay. All right. Very good. So that's part of it. Gratitude. Good. All right. Tybal, and then Barbara, and then Cheryl. Go ahead.
Actually, I was going to talk about the 100 blessings now. I don't need to, but I have a small question. I'm right now doing it on audio, so there's no way to search. And he gave an example of a capital letter B period Nathan to Dina. And I didn't know what he was talking about, and I didn't have a way to search. And I couldn't find it in previous material. Who is B Nathan and who is Dina supposed to be?
I don't know. Oh, David. You mean
no, Dina. Dina.
Oh, no. I know what you mean.
I think it was the letter B, the name Nathan to Dina, and it was example after the section where he was talking about life is grace.
And who wrote that? He did?
Shai Held, but again, it's harder to figure things out in the audio.
I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know. Can't help you. I don't know. All right. So next, we got Barbara, and Cheryl had her hand up. And Margaret, are you raising your hand also? All right. Well, no. Okay. All right. So Barbara, then Cheryl.
Well, my first comment is an interesting one to me. More often when you hear about God when writing, people will call him a his.
We'll call
God a his.
Yeah.
Many, many years ago when Shimona was in religious school, so a little kid, you told us, and I've talked to you about this, that God was a his, but you now believe that God could be a his or a her or a combination. That's what you've told me. I just thought it was interesting that in this book, God is always referred to as her, that he's the opposite of everything I've ever read. And I thought it was interesting. That's just an out-and-out comment,
Right. No,
yeah,
go ahead.
I don't expect anything from you about it because it's just a comment.
No, that's good. I'm glad you mentioned that because, technically speaking, you either have to say God is the source of all permutations of gender definition or none. Okay. And I've argued that if you look at Genesis chapter 1, where it says, and when God created human beings, male and female, he created them, and they were created in God's image. That means, and that's all put together, somehow maleness and femaleness both are part of God's image. And my suggestion was that the same way if you talk about attributes of God, it talks about attributes of God, okay? Power, right? Wisdom, compassion, judgment. Add to the list maleness, femaleness, whatever. And that's
some of that I think you got when you took a period of time and studied Kabbalah. When you came back and taught us about two sides, one the female side and one the male side. I think that was when you changed your mind.
Oh, it was a whole process. So no, look, I try to use when I write and talk God instead of saying he or she, just say God, even though it sounds repetitive. Okay, that's what I try to do. Sometimes it's the Bible. Look, remember up until I don't know when, the 99.9% of the written works of the Jewish people were written by men.
That's true.
Thought about by men. And some of the men even said that women should not study Torah because they were going to misunderstand it. Poo, 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 oy vey.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But notice that the author used, I found it really, it took me aback when the author used the word God's self.
Yeah, that's okay.
Instead of himself or herself. So it was a really good, I thought that was pretty inventive and cool.
Okay.
Yeah, so did I. Then my other comment, it really got to me and I really thought a lot about it, is the concept of grace.
Yes.
The same day that I was reading that chapter last week, I had a patient, a black lady, very, very nice religious lady. And we were talking because she has no real understanding of Judaism, the difference between Jew and Judaism. And she said, "You mean you don't believe in grace?" I said, "Right." I didn't really know what grace was when I said right, because it's not something that we talk about, God having grace or giving us grace. And there's a couple other concepts. But the fact that was the first thing she mentioned to me, grace is a very important thing. So I'm reading the chapter and it says that the grace is the basis of Christianity, the belief that the Christians are saved by their faith through grace, which it's with that, therefore, that it's an undeserved favor. And the idea of grace initially before he got to the Christian feeling, and then Christianity, grace is created by God, who gives it as a help to somebody who desires to have the help. But the fact that it's such a basic element of Christianity, I got from this lady, and when I was reading in the book, it really stuck in me because I had never thought about grace in Judaism. Well, we don't believe that grace is the overriding basis of our religion. And apparently, according to what I read in there, and I've got notes that I'm reading from. Yeah, go ahead, Joel.
You checked in a little late. That's something we talked about at the very beginning.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I had to take Shimona to the store.
That's all right. Just letting you know, we've discussed it. Right. And the point that I'm making is, I said he used a Christian term, but to define that creation of human being is an act of grace on God's part.
Right.
We didn't ask for it. We didn't do any good for it. God did it out of love, pure love.
Right. The sentence that was important to me was that God gives goodness to us freely, and the Bible describes himself.
Barbara, in the Christian sense, the act of grace, the great act of grace was that God gave the Christians his one and only son as a sacrifice.
Right.
Sin. That was the act of grace. When I say grace, that's what I have in mind. So it's different from ours. Yes.
Right. I mean, I just thought it was fascinating that we actually have the concept of grace or goodness, which is really goodness.
Now,
We don't use the word, we use goodness more than we use grace. And it's a love of God for us. That doesn't mean that God is giving us more than what another race of people are getting.
Okay, moving on. Thank you. Cheryl, and then Denise, and then Margaret, if you still want to say something. Cheryl.
I'm going to be very boring and drag this back to blessings and gratitude and charity, tzedakah, because it seems to me that, yes, you wake up and you say Modani, of course. And yes, life is the first thing. But from that, because you've said that, if you think about it, you should be thanking God for an awful lot of other things as well. The fact that you can think well enough actually to remember to say the bracha, because people develop dementia, they can't. That you've got the mind that allows you to understand it. That, such trivial things as you've got hot water gushing out of a tap to fill your kettle. And all of these are blessings. They are grace. They are what's been given to us freely. And once you say thank you for all of those, once you realize how much you are given without even thinking about it, then you should give tzedakah. You want to give tzedakah because you've got so much. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, you hit the nail right on the head. Sure. Tzedakah, you got to keep in mind, it's a challenging word because tzedek means righteousness, right? What's fair, what should be. Okay, and the whole point of it was that supporting the poor was something that should be built-in part of the system. Okay, so and it was because it became law. And when the Jewish communities were established, organized Jewish communities were established, starting in rabbinic times, moving down through history. If you read what was required of these towns when they were, I'm talking 12th century, 13th century, 11th century, in Europe, in the Muslim lands, you had all kinds of institutions that were required to be set up to take care of poor people. Okay, it was built on the agricultural principles that are laid out in the Torah of that they can come and pick up a grain that fell behind the end of the corner of the field that is left for them. All these things that are set up by law that you got to do, otherwise you're subject to penalty. But then there was called matnot la'aniyim, which is gifts to the poor, which transcend that. Okay, and that's free will on our part, because the notion would be, if there's a poor person you see going, think about a homeless person, okay? You can say there are institutions in town that can feed this person. On the other hand, you can go and buy a sandwich and give it to him right then and there, and he have something to eat. So that's an outpouring that's grace, if you will. That's chesed. That's the difference. Chesed also has with it obligatory concepts, because the concept of chesed means a covenantal obligation, both from God to us and us to God. But at the same time, it always is extended to mean an act of loving kindness, where you're imitating God by doing you are giving a free will gift, not a one that imposed upon you by law, but a free will gift to someone in need. Okay, and even if the person asks for it, sure, if we have time, we're gonna read Maimonides' 8 levels of charity, and you will see how that all fits into this. Okay, but yes, right. So thank you, God, for my brain. Great line, great blessing. Think about it. Thank you for my brain. Wake up in the morning and say, oh, today's Tuesday. I remembered. Thank you, God, for my brain. Great. Something to think about if you remember. Okay, write it down. Okay, Denise, again.
So just going back to the maleness of God, because I think, we're in 2024 and we tend to think of it in a 2024 way. But there's also the pre-2024 perspective. So I was an anthropology major, and male deities are culturally universal. And they're always power, right? So things that are created by male deities and things like that. And there are female deities, Mother Earth, kindness, love, etc. But Judaism is the first instance where power and love are linked in the same being, that they're not parsed out. One is for you, one is for you. And I think that's pretty radical and amazing that, that we think about God as a source of love. We say Avinu Malkeinu, and you see Avinu as the loving father first, even before being a king. Before us, nobody did that. The Christians sort of ran with it, God is love and all this stuff, but up until then, we're the only ones.
Right. No, you're right. And I think that's something that we have forgotten. Again, a lot of these statements, you think Avinu Malkeinu is a good example. Mm-hmm. We say it all the time, right? All kinds of that. You think about it. That's the point. Obviously the concept of king, Melech HaOlam, right, is powerful. And we are impressed by power. Compassion is quiet. Compassion is, soft. Doesn't make a big impact. But in many ways, the impact of compassion can be greater than the impact of force. And that's something we have to remember. It says, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Praised are Yud-Heh Vav-Heh, who is the God who is dominated by compassion. And only secondarily is God melech haolam. We don't realize. But Adonai El Rachum B'Chanun. Mm-hmm. Right? God is the first thing we hear about that. When Moses wants to know, tell me about you. He says, I'm compassion. I do punish. But primarily, I am compassion. And that developed the whole concept of God's 13 attributes of compassion. That's, again, remember what Rashi said. Adonai Elohim, who comes first? Adonai. And that's what you're saying. And the point is, we're human beings. We're impressed by power. Right? We're impressed by power, wealth, big things. Woohoo! Okay? Well, we should be more impressed by the quiet things that really are much more significant in terms of maintaining a humane approach to living. Bert.
Yes. When Jacob woke up, I think it was from his dream, he said, Ma norah hamakom hazeh. How awesome is this place? Yeah. And I think he added, and I didn't realize God was here.
Anochi lo yadati.
Yes.
Yes. That is right.
Yes, I didn't know God was here. How amazing it is. Yeah. I was recently reading a book by a rabbi, and I forget the name, who suggested as a practice, and this comes after what Cheryl said, who suggested as a practice as you go around in life, repeating the phrase almost as a mantra, Ma norah hamakom hazeh, wherever you are. And that's kind of like a blessing.
Right, exactly. Yes. No, I would say when you see a bee landing on a flower, okay, you should say, Ma norah hamakom hazeh. It's a miracle. You know who really appreciated the bee and the ant, believe it or not? Yehuda Halevi, the great Spanish philosopher, doctor, etc., Zionist, whatever. And he says, you want to see a miracle? Don't look at the stars only, because everybody looks at the stars, right? Majesty, power, right? Right? He says, look at a bee, look at an ant. Look how they live, right? Amazing. They have their own clan, right? They have a family. They have a people. They help one another. They will often sacrifice their lives for one another. They build things together, right? It's amazing. The little bug.
Take a breath.
And they make honey. Bees make honey. It's amazing, right? That's a miracle. And we eat it. And we like it. And it's healthier than sugar. Well, close. Anyway, the point is, that's a real miracle. And even think about, how does a bee fly? It's the most non-aerodynamic creature I've ever seen. And there he is, buzzing around, those big black ones. Wow, And they live in the house, too. Happens to be my house. They make holes in my wood, But, they live there, and they don't want to bother me. If I stick my hand in there, they might get angry. But I'm intruding, they're miracles. So, that's the whole point. And we have, unfortunately, the notion of the supremacy of the human race can backfire on you. And when it says in Genesis, rule, right, there are plenty of people within religion who have argued, yes, the world was given to us, and we may satisfy our needs as human beings, and the needs of everything else is secondary. That had become a dominant feature of how people understood the relationship between human and the world. That's what it says in the Bible. But I remind everybody in the Genesis chapter 1, it says rule, and then it says you eat your agriculturally produced fruits and grains, and the animals get to eat my gift to them, which is the grass. And so it shall be. Implication, you got to make sure that that's the way it stays. And that means what? Respect for all life. We're all in the same boat. We were all created by the same God. And that's the beauty of Genesis chapter 1. The animals were not created for our sake. They were created for their own sake. Even the creepy crawlies, right? If you look at the Torah that way, we can't eat the creepy crawlies, right? God created them. Okay, right? We can't eat a shark because it doesn't have scales, right? Okay, great whites, go ahead, rule the seas, whatever you want. Whales, killer whales, probably the most dominant creature in the water. Think about killer whales, right? With the size of a small whale with the intelligence of a porpoise. That's pretty dangerous. That's pretty scary. But basically, they keep themselves. They live their life. We live ours. All right? So, okay. Anybody else? Yes, Margaret.
Well, I don't know how long this lasts, but I am really curious to hear what everybody thinks about the next section, which is sacred indignation and
yes, yeah. Well, that's the next thing we're going to talk about.
Okay, sorry.
Good. Yes. All right. So go ahead, lead us.
Protest. I mean, I guess that I just want to say that what heavily weighs on my mind, which is like super emotional and pedestrian and immediate and not lofty at all, is just the kind of protest. Everything he writes about indignation and social justice, and just a desire for justice, resonates with me. And yet, at the same time, I'm personally feeling really irritable about people's locally and immediately and temporally. So sorry to bring it down to this level, but just what's going on currently with regard to protest, So I just it's a super emotional reaction, but it seems really salient to me right now because we all live, right?
Right. No, it is
in this area.
Well, I think he recognizes that it can be a struggle. Okay. He can recognize that. Look, he deals with the whole thing with anger.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Let me just take a pause. One of the things I wanted to discuss with you in that regard was two examples that he brings from the Bible, and how to show how they are dealt with. Okay. So first he talks about, Nathan, the prophet, confronts King David, right? After he sent Bathsheba's husband off to war in the front line to kill him because she was pregnant with David's child. And nobody should know that everybody should think that it was the soldier's kid, okay? And if he dies, then and Bathsheba wouldn't know because his sex with her was immediately preceding her sex with him. No, he didn't have sex with her, right? He refused. He said, I got to stay with my troops. I'll sleep out here. He didn't go to her. That's what happened. David tried to get her. No, David tried to get him to go lie with her. And out of his loyalty to the troops, he said, no, I got to stay with the troops. My wife will understand. He never laid with her. So it's totally, David was the only one who had sex with her. But in order to shut him up, so he could say, it was his, there's no adultery on my part, quote unquote, he had him killed. Nathan found out about this, his royal prophet. And Nathan tells him the story, about the guy who had a sheep, et cetera, and the sheep was killed. And, the wealthy guy got off and the poor guy suffered. You can read the story as he tells it. What was David's reaction to it? Blatant anger. What kind of a man was this wealthy guy who could do something horrible like that to that poor shepherd, right? David is authentically angry. And then Nathan says, you, sir, are that man with what you did with Bathsheba's husband. Oh, so what did he do? He took David's anger and flipped it around and used it to point the finger at David in a manner that David would fully understand. And then he says, you are going to get it. You are going to have your son who is going to lie with your concubine, with your women, the same way that you lay with Bathsheba. And that's going to be a source of great anguish for you. And of course, he's predicting Absalom's revolt. And what does Absalom do? He takes David's concubines, and David had a whole harem, takes them up to the roof of the palace and has sex with them in public to demonstrate, I am now the king. These are my women. My father is no longer king. That's what Absalom did, okay? So it happened. So the point is, he uses that anger as a means to make David understand, and he was forced to accept the judgment because he himself was angry at a guy who did basically what he did, and he realized it, and it was true. So David brought that on himself, and he fought back. Remember, in the end, more tragedy with Absalom, because what happened to Absalom? What did Absalom tell his general, Joab? What did he tell him? Don't bring him to me. Don't kill him, right? And what did his general do? He killed him. And David was angry. And actually, I think if I'm not mistaken, he asked Solomon to get rid of him because of what he had done. On his deathbed, David says to Solomon, take care of this guy. Can't trust him because he killed my son. I mean, David's life was torment because of what he had done. And his own anger at the parallel case that Nathan talks about validated everything. So you can see that anger can be used sometimes as a vehicle to bring justice. That's what that story is. It brings justice. On the other hand, you have another situation where anger can lead to something bad. And that's the story of Shimon and Levi and the rape of Dinah and what they did to the men in Shechem ben Hamor's community, right? Remember the story? Well, I'll briefly tell you. So it says Dinah went out. This is in the book of Genesis, right? After Jacob is settling in the land. Jacob, right. Jacob is settling in the land, and they're in the land, the area of Shechem. It's funny. Shechem's father's name is Donkey. Hamor. Shechem ben Hamor is his. I don't know where they came up with that one. Anyhow, donkeys, I guess, were revered at certain points because they did a lot of work. Everybody depended upon them. Anyhow, so Hamor's son, Shechem, for whom the town is named, saw this beautiful woman, and he raped her. And they found out who it was. And it turns out he fell in love with her. And they talk about it. And how are they going to deal with the Israelites? What are they going to go tell Jacob? So, because they know about it. And when Shimon and Levi, who were Dinah's brothers, right? They're all children of Leah. Dinah's brothers, and the oldest two sons. No, Reuben is the number 2 and 3 sons. They were the ones who plotted to get rid of these people, to punish them for what had happened to their sister. So they come to at the initiation of the Shechemites, if we can call them that. They go to Jacob and said, "Look, let's make a deal here. You are a powerful man. People know you're a reputation. You're a shepherd. You're wealthy. We're here. We have a organized community. Let's join together. And our son Shechem, who's in love with Dinah, he will marry her, and we can have her, come together and create a good thing." And that way, the whole point was the Shechemites would get a sense of this is something that can enhance our stature here, and presumably Jacob will see the wisdom behind it. So before that can happen, Shimon and Levi go to the Shechemites and said, "We are Israelites. Our God has commanded us that Israelites must be circumcised." So he says, in order for you to marry our women, you have to be circumcised so you can enter into the covenant. And then we can make this deal. So they get circumcised. And there they are recovering. and they're clearly not up to 100%. So what does Shem and Levi do? They gather their guys together, and what do? They kill all the male Shemites. And Jacob hears about that, and he was silent. He did say one thing. He said, I'm not sure this was the best thing, because now you have tarnished my reputation, because people will think I'm a murderer. Anyhow, at the end on his deathbed, what does he do? He curses them, Shimon and Levi. You are going to have no part of this. In the end, you are not having any part in my inheritance of the brothers. Nope, because you shamed me. So their anger, you could say justifiable anger, but their explosion of anger, that did them no good. So the point that he's trying to make by telling these stories is that anger can be a two-edged sword. Anger about something that is horrible going on. Okay, if you were a German in 1935 witnessing what was happening with the Jews, and you had a sense, you had a conscience and a sense of ethic and morality, and you felt that this was wrong, okay, at the very least, you should have tried to save Jews and help them get out of the country. This is before 1939, right? You could still get Jews out. They should have moved, because at that point, that's what Hitler wanted. The first level was get them out of Germany. Remember, he came up with the idea that they should go to, where was it, in Africa? Madagascar. Send the Jews to Madagascar. Get them out of here. In the end...
No. Madagascar. He said send them. He said they should go to Palestine, actually. At one point, he said they should go to Palestine.
Yeah, but
Madagascar was going to be where they were going to exile. Right. Madagascar and Siberia that was the point of the ghettos.
Right, you're right. I'm sorry.
He was going to deport them originally, but because France had controlled Madagascar, and once he conquered France, but Britain still controlled the seas, and since he couldn't control Britain, that went under. And so Siberia,
you're right. But it was Herzl said Uganda. That's right.
No, but Hitler did say they should even go to Palestine, anywhere but Germany, even Palestine.
Yeah, okay. So he was a Zionist. Ha ha ha. I didn't say that. Anyway, the point was that was his main goal, right? So if you were organizing Germans to get the Jews out of Germany, he probably would have said, "Fine, do it." Wouldn't have killed you. Okay, but they did. Some of them probably may have gotten angry. They did not. So the point is, anger has to be channeled. I think what he's saying here is the anger needs to be channeled in a way that the energy can be defined so that something positive can come. You can use it to fix something, to somehow participate in some kind of an activity that fixes the matter that you think is bad for the community. Something, in other words, take the energy and make it productive, to right a wrong, or to get something that's broken fixed. Then the anger can be a useful kind of an expression. It's very idealistic, Margaret. I think your feelings are understandable. I think it's very, but you gotta set idealistic notions down in an attempt to get people to think in those terms. And sometimes the anger, look, it may result now, I don't know where that's heading, but the response, the growing uproar in the Jewish community in the United States regarding anti-Semitism, which was dormant 5 years ago, right? It's here now. It's active. We're starting to push, right? Which we did not do enough of during the 20s and 30s. Here in this country, there were people who tried, that there was a group in Los Angeles in the 1930s as Hitler took power. There were Nazis in Los Angeles, in Southern California. And there were a group of Jews who really pressured the FBI and Congress to get rid of these people. It took a lot of pushing. And in some regard, it helped. Because they caught them they were planning all kinds of horrific things, not only against the Jews, but against the American in America on behalf of Hitler. It was at the time that when they nipped it in the bud because Jews acted. Okay, but since then, we have the ADL and all these things and they help and this and that. But the uproar that exists now, the anger that exists now, which is legitimate, must lead to correcting all the factors that are feeding into it, whatever they might be. And it has to be done productively. It doesn't mean, so the guys, for example, who the Jews who that evening came into the encampment at UCLA and started doing violent things, which we know happened, right? That made it harder. But at the same time, fortunately, we were able to turn that around with the leadership of UCLA, that they said, had you been serious enough about dealing with this at the outset and trying to understand what was really going on beforehand, this never would have happened. So you have to, but that has to be pushed. It has to be pushed. All right. So anger can be channeled to fix a problem. That's his message. But anger, raw anger, is bad. Raw anger can just blow things away. Okay, Bobby Meth.
Not that it has anything to do with the discussion, but I don't know if you know the new chancellor of UCLA, who is Mexican. He and his wife are both children of survivors.
They're what survivors?
They are children of survivors. The new chancellor of UCLA,
Jewish,
and his wife. Their fathers were Jewish. That's all I can tell you. I know for sure. And each of them, both he and his wife's fathers were survivors.
Wow, very interesting. And what's his name was leaving is Jewish. The current chancellor. The current chancellor is Jewish. He's Jewish. He is. Yeah, they made a mistake.
He's listed as being Jewish whenever they write about him in the papers.
Yeah, no, he is. I'm sure he's not an observant Jew.
Yeah, the outgoing. I'm talking about the outgoing. But the new incoming, I've read that he's Mexican. I've never read he's Jewish. But when you read more about him, but his father was Jewish and a survivor, and her father was Jewish and a survivor.
Look, let's hope that he's sensitive. Chances are he would be. Chances are he would be. Yeah, good. Okay, all right. Sorry. Anyhow, well, any other observations of? Yes, go ahead, Barbara. Do you mind if we run 15 minutes more?
No problem.
Okay.
I thought that his statement that anger can be a manifestation of respect if you channel it correctly, if you're not there screaming.
It can. He was thinking in terms of, remember he's talking about the Psalms, okay, which some of you were studying with me in my Psalms class, so you know what I'm talking about. The anger, we just read last night, Psalm 44, which is filled with anger against God. It's unbelievable. Scholars wonder, how did this get put in the Bible, for God's sake? Because the author is just devastated and yells at God, okay, even more than Job. Anyhow, it shows you by the fact that it's in the Bible means that it represents a legitimate response. You can get angry at God. You can get angry at God. It's okay.
Well, there's also what he mentioned is the story of Abraham with God over Sodom and Gomorrah.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to deal with that.
Huh?
I wanted to I'm glad you raised that. Well,
protest if necessary is good.
Correct. Right. Yes.
But not in a violent way where you're going out and trying to hurt people. He's talking about being able to calmly talk about it.
Yeah. Well, but I think the point is that, before I want to spend a few moments talking about Abraham. All right, Bert.
That's exactly what I wanted to talk about, because this is, after all, a book about love. And I thought that the story of Abraham and the way he dealt with it was very interesting.
Yes.
In that he was, from what I understand, is that at its core, Abraham was being motivated by love of justice and by love of God. Yes. And that in many ways, that kind of passion, that kind of love for other people can lead to protest. And so that I found very interesting. The other thing from a literary standpoint, I just thought he went way down a bunch of rabbit holes and took a lot more time compared with the earlier chapters.
I want to go to that right now, because the later chapter would be the Akedah, the binding of Isaac. Okay, and he wants to argue that that you shouldn't be angry at Abraham, because what he did was essentially affirming his faith in monotheism in the presence of a polytheistic culture. In other words, the Israelites were surrounded by pagans who believed in multiple gods. And here the Israelite God was asking something that was unheard of. And Abraham says, okay, I'll take care of it. Not only did he take care of it, but with zeal, because it says he got up early. He took care of, planned it all out, loaded everything up. He had 2 assistants with him. And then they go up the mountain. And he tells the assistants, you guys stay down here. And they go up the mountain. Very little is spoken. And the fact is the whole story doesn't have a lot of details to it, because you want to get a sense, boom is boom, 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 it's done. And then it's stopped. Okay. So what he's saying is, don't accuse Abraham of hypocrisy, where he stands up for the people of Sodom, but doesn't stand up for his own son, because he felt he was, what shall we say, I used this term yesterday about the psalmist. He was totally committed to the concept of one God. And he felt he needed to make that expression, transcending everything else. Okay. Now, I'm going to argue with him. Okay, that's what I wanted to do. So I see your hands, but let me just say out my argument. Okay. I'm going to go to my notes because it's somewhat detailed. Okay. So in chapter 17, before all of this happens, so here's what God says to Abraham. Nevertheless, Sarah, your wife, shall bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac, and I will maintain my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offspring to come. And again he says, so Ishmael, yeah, I'll bless him, but my covenant I will maintain with Isaac. So it is perfectly clear that God has made a covenant with Abraham, and that the covenant will be continued with Isaac, right? And this is something, who wants this? God wants it. He wants a covenant relationship with this family, because as he said, as he will say later on, before the Sodom and Gomorrah thing, he will say, I know that Abraham is going to teach his children justice and law. Okay? All right. So then comes the test, right? And this is chapter 22. And God comes to Abraham, and it says, God, Elohim, put Abraham to the test, saying to him, Abraham, he answered, here is my son. Take your son, favorite son, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. Offer him there as a burnt offering. So who's talking to him? Who's talking to him? God, right? God. All right. He does exactly what God said. Then what happens? Later on, the end. A messenger of Yud-He Vav-He called to him from heaven. Abraham, don't raise your hand against the boy. Don't do anything. For I know now you fear God, since you have not withheld your son from me. Okay. So now, who's speaking to him? A messenger, an angel. And later on, he says, he had something else. A messenger of Hashem called to Abraham a second time from heaven. Okay. So there's angels up in heaven. So it's distant. And who's talking? God directly? No, he's going through the intermediary of an angel. Now, presumably, God's voice is going, the angel serves as a kind of a broadcasting system, okay? Because it's the word of God there. But the angel is intervening between. When this whole thing began, it was God who tested him. Why was that? Okay? Why was that? Second point. Right after this story, what's the next thing that happens? Next chapter.
Sarah, his mother, the wife and mother died.
Sarah dies. Okay? Sarah dies. And the other point that I want to ask is, when they finish from the mountain, okay, where did Abraham go before he hears of Sarah's death? Where is Abraham living? He's living in Beersheba. Where is Sarah? Sarah is in Hebron, Kiryat Arba. Okay? That's a long distance. They're separated. Okay, 1 second, Bonnie. I see you. Okay? Where's Isaac? Where's Isaac? Do you know? Anybody know? I'll tell you. Isaac, okay? So remember, Abraham remembers his son. He's not married, so he sends his servant up to bring down Rebekah, right? Okay. So he's told Rebekah, Isaac, just a second. Yes. So Isaac came back from Be'er Lahai-Roi, where he was settled in the region of the Negev. It's interesting. The Be'er Lahai-Roi is the same place that Hagar and Ishmael were saved by God. Anyhow, they're all separated. When was the last time that Abraham spoke to Sarah? I don't know. Before the Akedah, before the binding happened. Okay. Did Abraham have any conversation with Isaac about the need for a wife? Did he consult with him? No, he just did it. In other words, after the Akedah, God stops talking to Abraham. Isaac doesn't talk to Abraham, and Sarah doesn't talk to him, and she dies. What does that say? I want to suggest that even though God, the angel, speaking the second time after the angel saves Isaac, says, and you're going to become a great nation, etc., etc. So in that regard, yes, because that was God's plan. And so he says the plan is still operative, which means the covenant will continue forward. Okay? But that's the end of God's conversation. That's it. Never hear about that again. So I want to suggest that explicitly, pragmatically speaking, according to the plan, Abraham passed the test. You can't punish him because he was loyal to God. But the Torah is telling us he really didn't. He really didn't. What he should have argued with God was not only, this is my son, I got to stand up for him. What should he have argued with God regarding the covenant when he was told, kill Isaac? What should he have said to God? He says, how can you do this? You made a sacred promise that the covenant was going to be continued through Isaac, and now you're going to kill him and break your promise and break the covenant that you established? That's what he should have said. Not just the pain of a father losing his son, but this great God of his. He should have become angry. Wouldn't you become angry? Just in terms of your commitment to this God. This was a covenantal relationship. You should have said, what, you're a God who breaks covenants? Who said that to him? Moses will, right? After the golden calf, what does God want to do? Destroy the people and start over with Moses. What does Moses say? You can't do it because you got a covenant. You made a promise. He stood up for the people. He kept that covenant right in front of God. Why didn't Abraham do that? Get my point? So I'm going to argue with our beloved author, say you missed the point. He did. He failed because he did not raise the issue. He should have shown his loyalty to God, not by blindly following what he said, but by raising the key issue of their relationship, which is the covenant, which God established. That's what he should have done, and he didn't do it. He failed. So I am going to disagree with Held on that point. All right. Okay, I got 3 hands. I will go 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to stop. Okay, so let's see. First, we got Cheryl, and then Denise, and then Kathy.
One other thing that I would say is that the whole point of monotheism, as opposed to pantheism, was, as I thought, not just we are believing in one God who created the whole world, but also that God is a very different type of God to the pantheistic, rather capricious, bloodthirsty, demanding gods of the pagans. So I think I'd have been going, excuse me, God, haven't we forgotten something here? Weren't you the one who said, we don't do this kind of blood sacrifice. We don't even damage animals under the Noahide laws. What are you doing?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole thing I find the Akedah deeply problematic.
Yeah, you're right.
And every time anybody tries to tell me that it isn't, I sit there on Rosh Hashanah and think, I've got no idea why I'm supposed to think Abraham was so good for doing this.
Yeah, exactly. He should have raised it. He should have said, this is what the pagans do. It's a very good point. So the 2 counts, right? The covenant and how he acted. Okay, Bonnie, you still want to ask a question? Bonnie? All right, hold on. I'll get to you. Okay. All right, yes. So I think that's a good point. There's two questions you should ask. Number one, what about the covenant? Number two, you want to do the same thing? Have me do the same thing that the other false gods that you're going to tell me I shouldn't worship, and my kids are going to shouldn't worship them? And look what you're going to do. Act just like they do. How are you different? Good point. Okay, Denise.
So I want to offer an alternate reading of the Akedah, kind of as a parable of mindfulness and love. Specifically that if you look at the Hebrew words especially, it's kind of a situation where it looks like Hashem is telling him everything we're saying. Go take your kid, the one you love, kill him, blah, blah, blah. But it's very, very carefully kind of crafted and articulated in the Hebrew word. For example, it never says the word lishchot. It doesn't ever say to kill him as a sacrifice. That word is not there in the Hebrew. And when you look in the Torah, with the Rashi group that I was in with Kathy for a while, we were studying sacrifices, and it was like that word lishchot was everywhere you look, that word is there. And that Hebrew word is not there in this story. And I think that's significant in a massive way, because I think what this story is telling us is, in the instance that happened with Abraham, I think it's telling us that he knew that it looked really bad. And he knew that it looked like he's being told to do exactly the thing that is his worst nightmare. And he knew God enough, and he trusted that love enough to know that even though it looked that way and it felt that way and it touched off every deep fear he had and lived his whole life again, he trusted that bond enough to say, I don't know how, but I know it's not going to end up the way I think it's going to. And sure enough, that's what happened. And at the end, when the angel comes and tells him, he uses the word in Hebrew, yirah, which means fear. That's how we translate it. But it also means see. And it could just as easily be written and told as a story of, I see that you get it. So let's just calm down now. And I think that we have that story for us. The relevancy to us is for all time. Right now, all the anti-Semitism, everybody's freaking out. Oh my God, it's going to be the Holocaust all over again. And oh my God, Hamas, and that's the covenant. So we know that no matter how bad it looks, and no matter how bleak it gets, and no matter how awful it is.
All right, yeah, but keep in mind, the covenant was never violated when the temples were destroyed and we were sent into exile.
But everybody thinks that. Everybody thinks, that's the whole, like all those people who
my point.
The Holocaust. How could there be God? Look, there was a Holocaust and all that stuff. That's what this story is for. It's to say no matter what it looks like, that's just not what's happening.
We want to live to what should, then Jeremiah in his prophecies was arguing in vain? No. He tried to save the people, but he couldn't because their sinfulness had been so great. Okay? The point is you don't want to let it get to that point. And that's the point.
But I think that Avram understood. I think he knew that in the end he wasn't going to have to kill him, even though it looked that way, and that it would go right up until the edge. I think that that's the whole point, is that Avram knew, and that's what love is that it's knowing.
All right, but I want to respond.
It is, even when you can't see it, that you know it's there.
I understand. I've heard that argument as well. And Abraham, he said that he may have figured out that somebody even said he realized it was only a test. But then why did he do it with such vigor? Why did he not try to talk to God along the way? Why was there no conversation on his part? That's the point.
I think there's an answer to that.
He has every right, though, to raise the question. But here's the point. You say the word shachat is not there. That's true. But this is what it says. All right? Ha'alehu sham la'olah. Offer him up as an olah. You know what an olah is?
But it's just the part one. It's offer. Put him there. Go right up to the edge. Go as far as you can possibly go. And still it's not going to happen. That's right. The whole point. Offer him the olah, but you're not going to fulfill it. Right. It just looks that way.
What I'm saying is not using the word shachat doesn't mean much. When you take an olah, you know what that is?
Yeah. It says it even on Shabbat, le'olah v'nitzka.
What is the olah? What is the olah?
The going up of the
burning of the entire thing.
Yeah.
It's the most destructive of the sacrifices.
Right. And it's exactly because it's tapping into his biggest fears and it's challenging his deepest beliefs.
I respect.
And that's the point, is that he knows it's not going to happen in the end.
Respect what you're saying, because there are numbers of people who argue that. Okay. But I think then you have to explain to me, why is that he didn't raise the issue of the covenant?
Because he knew he didn't have to.
He should have.
I don't think
Moses did.
it was different.
No. Moses could have agreed and said, you know what? These people are sinful. Yeah, go ahead. Let's destroy them. He could have said that. But he had the sense of concern that now God, and there it doesn't say God was testing him. God got angry. You know, there are 3 times when God gets so angry that he wants to destroy the people. Do you know what they are? What are the 3 times where Moses talked God out of destroying these?
Noah.
Number 1 is the golden calf. What's the second one? Kathy, do you know?
I said no. I don't know. I said Noah, but
no. I'm talking about destroying the Jewish people. What's the second one?
The golden calf. The
spies.
Oh, the spies.
The spies. What's the third one? Korach. God says to Moses and Aaron, move away, because I'm going to bring a horrible destruction and get rid of all these people, all the people. And Moses answers and says, the innocent with the guilty. And God says, okay, you're right. Tell the people to move back. Okay. So Moses 3 times does that. Abraham only does it once. He could have done it a second time and put God on the spot. And that would have been a test of his. That would have been a test. And I venture to say that maybe God was expecting him to do that. And he didn't. And that's why God stopped talking to him. God didn't talk to him afterwards. I'm just offering an alternative. I mean, there are other people, very thoughtful people who agree with you, Denise. Absolutely. And I can't say that I'm totally right, but I think you have to explain to me why all of these negative results didn't happen. And Dafka, why is it that the Torah presents him in defending, as he should have, but defending these horrible, horrible people? But in dealing with maintaining a covenantal promise, he's silent. I mean, it's not that cut and dry. And by the way, Denise, what it means is we're going to have lots of different interpretations of it. And that's the way it is. All right, Bonnie. Oh.
I was just going to ask whether it's possible that the parable of the sacrifice of Isaac is to teach the concept, thou shalt not kill, as opposed to testing Abraham or his faith. That maybe that's what we're supposed to come away from that with.
That's an interesting question. I hadn't thought about it, because the answer ultimately is that there's sanctity in the human life. I mean, a whole notion against, offering human sacrifice, which is what you can see this as being, it's not just, that's what it's talking about. Yes. That even, in other words, even as an act of worship to God, the human life cannot be offered. And in the eyes of antiquity, that is a primary lofty goal, right? Right. The notion of serving God, right, is dominant, especially in the Torah with the struggle that the Israelites, the monotheists had with the polytheists within the Jewish people. It was an ongoing struggle. And so any statement that could be made to avoid pagan practices, which would be to offer human life as a sacrifice to God, clearly that would be something that would be on the agenda here. And in the end, that's probably what this was. Yes. So in that regard, yes. But I would, it's not remember, the Bible approves of capital punishment. The law of Torah allows for capital punishment. There's no question about that. But that's after proper adjudication, trial, and so forth and so on. So, I mean, but you can't say that the Bible is opposed to capital punishment, all right? Regardless of what some of us may feel, the Bible is not. The rabbis had problems with that, in the early generations. Yes. But anyway, all right, Kathy, and then I think it's 2:00.
Okay. Just a something that I've always wondered about was, if at one point, I think Abraham says, don't worry to Isaac, God will take care of this.
Yes. Yeah.
So he did have faith, but the other part is, it doesn't say take Isaac and sacrifice. It says take your first.
No, it ends up Isaac. He goes through a whole list. Read it.
He doesn't say the word Isaac. He says your loved one,
No, Kathy, stop.
No?
Hold on. Wait. Let me get there. I had it a moment ago. Hold on. I'll read it to you. Listen carefully. We're getting there. Okay, here we are. All right. Kachna et bincha, take your son. Et yechidcha, your only son. Asher ahavta, whom you loved. Et Yitzchak.
Oh, okay. I missed that. All right. So the other question is, Abraham loved Ishmael.
Yes.
He didn't really love Isaac. So this was his way of being able to transfer the covenant to Ishmael if he was to give Isaac give up to that.
An observation.
And that is why, Abraham didn't go to Sarah to say, Isaac is alive, didn't send a messenger when it came down. But he went to Hagar.
Yeah. No, Hagar doesn't say that.
Well, later that says
he married Keturah.
Right, who they say is Hagar, right? There are those.
That's Midrash. That's Midrash.
Well, okay, but he went away. He didn't bring Isaac with him.
No, I hear you.
It's a terrible thing, but you talked about how Abraham no longer was in the picture, was no longer talked to. And we go on to Isaac, and there is, except for when he dies, and they get, back together. So it's a little bit of it may be a stretch, but it almost is. He wanted to get this done quickly so he could, then go off to Ishmael.
I understand what you're saying. I'm not. That thought crossed my mind. I'll be honest with you, especially his not talking to Sarah, because clearly they had differences of opinion about their kids. But at the same time, it was God who God initiated this, not Abraham. That's number one. Number two, God, when he tells Abraham Isaac will get the covenant, Isaac doesn't respond. He said before that, remember I read it, I alluded to it. He said, Ishmael, I'll take care of. And he says, but Isaac gets it. Okay. So this was not Abraham's decision to make. And his commitment to God, we know, was strong. Remember, before he allows Sarah to kick out Hagar, he goes to God, right? And God says to him, listen to your wife. Don't worry. I'll take care of them. And once he hears that, he says to Sarah, okay, let her go. And God took care of him. And he became a great nation, right? So the notion of tension between him and Sarah, I had sensed that. And I think we're on the same page with regard to that. But his notion of trying to manipulate God like that, I don't think he's that nasty. And I think God would have figured it out. I don't think that one I don't see happen. Okay.
I don't know if it's a manipulation or he's saying, oh, maybe God realized.
Oh, but God was clear. No, God was very clear on it. If you want,
that he would take care of it. So he's all this. Why all of a sudden now I'm supposed to sacrifice Isaac because maybe God just was wrong and he's looking at the wrong. So he wants me to take care of it.
I think what the Bible, remember, the story was crafted by people who were trying to get across a message, right? So there were two messages here.
Okay.
The first message was, number one, this man is so committed to God, he's intoxicated with one God. He's willing to do whatever God says, okay? That's number one. And number two, don't sacrifice children. That's not something that we do. So I think those are the messages. And I think Abraham served rabbinic in subsequent generations as both Jewish and Christian, and to some degree even in Islam. He served as a model of faith in God, as an exemplar. And it was the Akedah that led people to reach that conclusion, that he was totally devoted to God. And, that's why they're called the Abraham Accords, right? What's going on right now? No, because the point is, because the Muslims have great respect for Abraham, as do the Christians.
Yeah, well, the Muslims say that Ishmael was on the.
Yes, of course. That's their interpretation. You can't go argue with them.
Well, I mean, they could, if they said, your firstborn or whatever, they leave out the word Yitzhak. But
yeah.
So that's.
All right. So my point is that but all three faith traditions, as they evolved, viewed Abraham as a person of great faith. That we can all agree on. And he was. And this is seen as the proof, the most profound proof. But I would say that it's also there as an argument against that being an authorized form of worship. That is not a way that we should worship. All right, folks, I think we set a personal best. 2 hours and 8 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
We're still here. Oh my God. Well,
Thank you.
Since we're talking about God. All right. Next week, assignment. Okay. Reading on. Next week is a long reading because we're doing chapters. All right. So next week, that's July 3rd, is chapters 4 and 5. You see, it's a long reading. So start tonight, get to work on it, and we'll talk about next week as we move on. All right. Let me say to you guys again, Yeshar Koach, wonderful conversation. I mean, each one of you and your contributions, what you said was meaningful, and I love it. I think what we've done is we have different perspectives. We brought in different perspectives, and that's exactly what we want to do. And because I have my opinion and you have yours, doesn't necessarily mean that I'm right and you're wrong. Okay, I am only a human being like the rest of us, and we can all understand things, hopefully, for the good.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.